Hey everyone, welcome to Sequence of Instructions. Thanks for joining me. You may have noticed last week I added a new playlist called Advanced JavaScript, of which this video is now in. I did that because I realized our Learning to Code playlist should actually just focus on concepts of programming, and if you want to dive deep into a specific language, there should be a specific playlist for that. And so that's why we're at this Advanced JavaScript playlist. The two videos that are already made are Asynchronicity and Context and Scope. This is the third video I'm making. It's going to be all about constructors. What is a constructor pattern in JavaScript? We're going to learn it. If you haven't seen the context and scope one, definitely check it out because it's going to build directly off of that. Alright, so what is a constructor? We learned in the last video that if you have some function, you can access it gets a new context when declared with the new keyword. So if I do new foo, it's gonna enter foo, it's gonna create a new context, give me an x, and bar is now gonna be an object with this property x equal to 5. That's what we learned in the context and scope video. And put simply, this is all a constructor is. It's this function that you invoke with the new keyword, and it gives you a new object, constructs a new object for you. Now, the reason this is useful is not really highlighted in this example because this is boring and trivial and who cares. But if I make a few changes here, like let's say I call it person, you're going to pass it a string. I'm going to set name on this object to whatever that string is, and maybe I have another property, this time it's a function, that's going to console.log hello, I am whatever my name is. So now we can say person1 is a person, we're going to pass Joe Smith. Alright, so this is, you can see it obviously follows the same pattern as what we learned in the last video, the foo example, but it's a little more built out. Now there's not only one property, there's another. So there's a greeting property, which is a function itself. So what does this do to how does this change our code at all? Well, let's see. Let's just check what is person1. It's an object. Okay, we knew that. We knew it would be an object. Well, it should have a name property, right? It does. It's a string. What is the name? Let's see what the name is. Joe Smith. That's great. Now, I said it now also has a greeting property. Well, what's the greeting property? It's a function. So we can invoke this function and see what happens. It prints, hello, I am Joe Smith. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So it calls this function, we call the function from the context of the global scope, but because this function is declared inside inside a function that gets a new context, this .name refers to the one in the same context. So person1.greeting is going to print hello, I am Joe Smith, where Joe Smith is set to the name of the context that we created when we constructed the person1 object. So to drive this point home, let's make a few more. Let's have a person2 and person3. Person3 can be Mike Doe. Maybe we'll have Rachel Miles. Have a few people in here. And we'll see that they each have their own greeting. So Joe Smith's person1 says hello, I'm Joe Smith. Person2 says hello, I'm Rachel Miles. Person3 says hello, I'm Mike Doe. And so just using this new function name pattern, we create these rich objects that can have a lot of specific functionality, but that is also sort of shared. And that's really all a constructor is. The new version of JavaScript, ECMAScript 6, the ECMAScript 6 standard, makes sort of this pattern, I'm not going to say obsolete, but it replaces it to more closely replicate object-oriented programming, which is really what this is kind of getting at. JavaScript doesn't support OO natively, object-oriented programming, but it does sort of embody some of the characteristics of it, and this is one of them. But I still thought it was important to teach the old way of doing it, the true factory method, because most websites are still going to use that, as a lot of devices might not be upgraded to the new version. And so if some of your users visiting your website are on some really old laptop or something, they're on Windows XP, they might not have ECMAScript 6 standards installed. Okay, the last thing I want to cover though here is that if you look up the constructor pattern online, you're going to see people shying away from what I did right here. And the reason is, let me put that back. Every time you made a new person, it's going to rerun this function. It's going to redeclare this function new each time. And so even though these functions are exactly the same between person1, person2, so person1.greeting does the exact same thing as person3's.greeting. If we were to see if they were actually the exact same function, it would be not true, or should be not true. Let's see. Correct. So false. So these are not the same function, even though they do the exact same thing, which means this isn't extremely efficient, because every time I declare a new person, JavaScript has to come through, re-instantiate this function over and over again. So what you're going to find online when you look it up, which is considered the best practice, is rather than declaring your function in here, you're going to declare it outside. So you do person.prototype.greeting. Alright, and I don't want to get too much into what a prototype is, but functions basically have these shared objects that they can refer to. So person1, when we say person1.name, JavaScript is first going to check, does it have a local name? In this case it does. If it doesn't, it's going to check, does the prototype, the function that it was made from, does it have a name property? And so for name, person1 does have a name, but person1 doesn't have a greeting, so it's going to check the prototype, which means it only has to build this function once. So if we made 1,000 people, person4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, they would share this function, but it's effectively exactly the same thing. Let's see, I can still do greeting for each of them, and it respects their names correctly, so that the context is preserved. But anyway, so just so you guys don't get too confused when you see this, if you research it online on your own, just realize that it's effectively, functionally, the exact same thing as doing this. Alright? I can't tab that. Alright, that's all I really wanted to cover in this video. Constructors. We'll play around with those a lot more in the future. You're going to come across them all the time. You're going to see this pattern repeated very, very frequently. So I encourage you all to play around with it, become familiar with it, because you'll need to become familiar with it. And until next time, take care. Bye.